Good morning, Wanya. Thank you very much for these conversations. In your view, what are the key challenges for the labor migration in the sub-regions of the Caribbean?
Thank you so much, Mamadou, and it's really a pleasure to be here on this channel. I think it's important for us to distinct two particular forms of movement in the community. And within our own regional integration process, we really refer to the movement of our persons as free movement of persons. That is one. And then obviously there's also movement from outside of the community, which is basically subjected to other rules. So in the community, for instance, the free movement of persons consists of two main elements. The first one is really the facilitation of travel, where community nationals have a right to be landed for 6 months. That is for CARICOM national in another member state. And then there's the movement under the economic purposes regime, under which regime you could provide a service, you could work as a skilled national, or you could establish a business. So we do face a number of challenges in that regard. One of the critical challenges that we're facing is the issue related to data. We have structures in place for member states to submit the data. It is a little bit incomplete. We would have done a specific work in terms of having an idea of how many persons really move, how many persons use the skills regime to move, and how many persons are moving under the surfaces as well as the establishment regime. And so we have a sense, but I think we could conclude to say that the regimes are underutilized. I think a couple of the other challenges that we have seen and identified is a lack of harmonization. We have made huge efforts in terms of ensuring that there is some amount of harmonization. In terms of legislative compliance, we would have provided member states with model legislation, which have been used in most instances, but at the level of administrative procedures and practices, we do know that our efforts could be enhanced in terms of ensuring that there is harmonization across the board. Because if it's 13 member states participating, it's very useful to have one process in place, and that is not yet the case. We also noticed that one of the particular challenges that we face is lack of awareness. Community nationals should be sensitized a little bit more. So we note, for instance, we have been doing a number of consultations in member states over the last year, and very important segments of the population are not aware about their rights. This morning at a session, the minister spoke about rights and obligations. So I think we need to make a concerted effort to make sure that community nationals are not only aware about their rights, but also their obligations. And we have been ramping up some of that work in that regard, but I think more can be done.
As you rightly said, the Caribbean is facing many challenges regarding labor migration. We see this situation also in other parts of the world. But in your view, what policies are needed to address, in particular, the demographic shifts, strengthen labor mechanism, and ensure that a new social contract maximizes the benefit for labor migration for all stakeholders?
I'll speak to two issues. I think firstly, it's important to note that there is a shift outwards of the community nationals moving to places like the US, the UK, Canada. And so the movement internally is not as great as one would have expected. We've done work in terms of assessing what the type of movement is in the community. The movement under the work permit regimes is bigger than the movement under any of the CSME regimes. That has been documented. And so as part of all of that is happening around us, and discussions coming out of a Crime and Security Conference in 2019, our heads of governments would have recognized the need for the region to develop a regional migration policy. And so the policy is an important one in us being able to express how we move within the region, but also how do we see the movement externally, outside of the region, into the region, as well as what the movement is from the region outside. And so that work has been happening. We would have identified 4 key elements to that work under the development of a regional migration policy. One is related to security and border protection. And the second one, which specifically focuses on labor migration, is work that we have been executing in collaboration with the ILO, the office in Trinidad and Tobago. And they provided us with some expertise in being able to undertake a labor market assessment, which will provide us with the data that we so desperately need. Our member states have been inviting that data from us, and so we hope that at the end of this consultancy, which is supposed to be 4 to 5 months. We have the data, and we could basically take decisions that are evidence-based. It is also necessary as part of the bigger context of the movement that is likely upcoming. In 2023, our heads of governments agreed that there will be full free movement in the community. And so it is part of a bigger goal that we had set as a community in Article 45, where the goal of total free movement had been identified. So we are now at a stage where heads called for that particular movement, and work is ongoing. And so in doing that work, it is exceptionally important for us to know exactly what the movement is, what are the flows, who is moving, what are the gaps in the member states. And as a consequence of what the findings are of that study, we could make very specific and targeted interventions to basically identify where there is need for training, for assistance, for capacity building. That will hopefully enable us to be able to plan ahead and basically decide on what is next in terms of further integration and advancing the movement of our people in the region.
My final question to you, you are attending here an ILO conference on the new social contract. As you probably know, there will be a very important conference at the end of this year in Qatar on the second World Summit for Social Development. In your view, how can the ILO and its constituent play a stronger role in shaping an inclusive and effective new social contract?
Right, so we have developed a very strong working relationship with the ILO's office in Port of Spain. And we are of the mindset that we are not replicating what the ILO is doing. So if there's a particular set of work that the ILO has expertise in, we are happy and welcoming of that expertise. So we have been partnering with them in a number of instances. They have also been providing us with assistance in building a CARICOM labor market information system. And so as part of that ongoing work, it is critical that the assistance from the ILO will need to focus on ensuring that the region is able to build its own type of social contract. If it is to be a regional social contract, it needs to be homegrown and needs to respond specifically to the needs of our member states. Earlier on in the panel discussion, I spoke to the fact that we do have 50 member states, but all have these specific issues. So even though we're all small and developing, the issues that Antigua and Barbuda, for instance, faces is not the same that Belize is facing. And it's also different to the one that Trinidad and Tobago is facing. So it's not a one-size-fits-all an approach, but it is one where the national actors are important. I think more and more, and we've heard that this morning, tripartism is very important. And so even if we want to develop tripartism at the regional level, that could only be successful if it is sustained and basically supported by a very strong national tripartism culture in the member states. And we also know that not all of our member states have that mechanism in place to be able to support tripartism, but it is one that is needed. And I think we can only be successful in building any type of social contract which is regional once there is a clear focus nationally on what needs to happen. And I think the ILO could play a role in that, in ensuring that the community, through its member states, can ensure that they build their own mechanisms and their own procedures that work for them.
Okay, thank you very much, Wanya, for this insightful conversation.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.